Good morning, Janites. I'm an unofficial Janite as of now. I gotta stop waking up and doing these, but I just get so excited to start the day with reading that, you know, it's the best time of day to do it. That's not backed by any science. That's just when I end up doing it, because, a girl's gotta work or whatever. There's a Jane Austen Society. Every once in a while, I just Google Jane Austen just to see if what else I can learn. There's a Jane Austen Society of North America. So much out there. Free student membership. Wow, it's a membership. Listen to our podcast, Austen Chat, Austen's World Close Up. Watch these videos. Wow. There's an upcoming event in Vancouver. Chalk and cheese, siblings as opposites in Austin. There's an event. Oh, these were in February. Oopsies. I mean, people doing drawings of Jane Austen. This truly is a whole world that I am learning about, and I'm excited to learning about. San Diego region, Pemberley to Dublin, in Carlsbad City Library, March 8th from 2 to 4 p.m. So that's out there. You should go. Pemberley to Dublin. Okay, where were we? Jane's gonna go to London to kind of get away from it all. I get it. And what else? Yeah, they were just, chatting for a long time about Mr. Darcy and Bingley and all of these people's what's going on with everybody. So we're on chapter 26. 26. XX. VI. 26. Mrs. Gardiner's caution to Elizabeth was punctually kind. What should we read the... Mrs. Gardiner had seen Pemberley. Oh, yeah, Mrs. Gardiner had seen Pemberley and known the late Mr. Darcy. That's right. Very proud, ill-natured boy, Mr. Darcy, says Mrs. Gardiner. Okay. Mrs. Gardiner's caution to Elizabeth was punctually and kind, given on the first favourable opportunity of speaking to her alone. After honestly telling her what she thought, she thus went on. These chapters are short, but they do kind of it's like a cliffhanger every time. You're like, just keep going. Are there books without chapters? Are those just novels? Books without chapters. No chapters in books. Is that a thing? I'm certain I've read some, but I don't know if they have a name. Books without... Hold on. Chapters. What are they called? Just novels. Chapters give a good stopping point. Dune had no chapters. Oh yeah, that's right. It was just... Right. Not a lot of books that have no chapters. Can a book be without chapters? Of course, many writers write their books without chapters. Okay. A novel. Classic. You are too sensible a girl, Lizzie, to fall in love merely because you are warned against it, and therefore I am not afraid of speaking openly. Seriously, I would have you be on your guard. Do not involve yourself or endeavour to involve him in any affection which the want of fortune would make so very imprudent. Ooh. Mrs. Gardiner speaking of Mr. Darcy. I have nothing to say against him. He is a most interesting young man, and if he had the fortune he ought to have, I should think you could not do better. Right. But as it is, you must not let your fancy run away with you. You have sense, and we all expect you to use it. Your father would depend on your resolution and good conduct, I am sure. You must not disappoint your father. It's all about not disappointing your father. My dear aunt, this is being serious indeed. Yes, and I hope to engage you to be serious likewise. Well, then you need not be under any alarm. I will take care of myself and of Mr. Wickham too. He shall not be in love with me if I can prevent it. Elizabeth, you are not serious now. I beg your pardon, I will try again. At present, I am not in love with Mr. Wickham. No, certainly am not. But he is beyond all comparison the most agreeable man I ever saw. And if he becomes really attached to me, I believe it will be better that he should not. I see the imprudence of it. Oh, that abominable man, Mr. Darcy. My father's opinion of me does me the greatest honour, and I should be miserable to forfeit it. My father, however, is partial to Mr. Wickham. In short, my dear aunt, I should be very sorry to be the means of making any of you unhappy. I can't make anybody unhappy. Okay. But since we see every day that where there is affection, young people are seldom withheld by immediate want of fortune from entering into engagements with each other, how can I promise to be wiser than so many of my fellow creatures if I am tempted? Or how am I even to know that it would be wisdom to resist? All that I can promise you, therefore, is not to be in a hurry. Everybody wants me to be in a hurry, but I'm not going to be in a hurry because it'd be too imprudent, and because I have to make everybody happy, and also because it's like, go get married, you need fortune, but don't get married because it's just fortune and he's a bad creature. This is wild. Okay. I will not be in a hurry to be myself his first object. When I am in company with him, I will not be wishing. In short, I will do my best. We're all just doing our best. Everybody's just doing their best. That was funny. I think, yeah, again, if I were smarter, I feel like this whole paragraph could be yummy for the analyzing, now that I'm thinking of it that way. But it's like the wisdom at this age, and also the pressure of this age just to get married, and the pressure of like this time of marrying with somebody with good fortune, and then but like, ooh, he's awful, don't marry him. And it's like, well, but he's what am I supposed to do? There's something that I'm trying to say that I can't say right now. Maybe if I keep reading, I'll find the words. Perhaps it will be as well if you discourage him from coming here so very often. At least you should not remind your mother of inviting him. Your mom invites him, and we need to discourage that. Okay. As I did the other day, said Elizabeth with a conscious smile. Very true. It will be wise in me to refrain from that, but I do not imagine that he is always here so often. It is on your account that he has been so frequently invited this week. You know my mother's ideas as to the necessity of constant company for her friends. But really, and upon my honour, I will try to do what I think to be the wisest. And now I hope you are satisfied. Be satisfied. I love that. Her aunt assured her that she was, and Elizabeth, having thanked her for the kindness of her hints, they parted. Wonderful instance of advice being given on such a point without being resented. Thank you for the advice. Mr. Collins returned into Hertfordshire soon after it had been quitted by the Gardiners and Jane. But as he took up his abode with the Lucases, his arrival was no great convenience to Mrs. Bennet. His marriage was now fast approaching, and she was at length so far resigned as to think it inevitable, and even repeatedly to say, in an ill-natured tone, that she wished they might be happy. Thursday was to be the wedding day, and on Wednesday Miss Lucas paid her farewell visit. And when she rose to take a leave, Elizabeth, ashamed of her mother's ungracious and reluctant good wishes, and sincerely affected herself, accompanied her out of the room, and they went downstairs together. Charlotte said, I shall depend on hearing from you very often, Eliza. That you certainly shall. And we have another favour to ask you. Will you come and see me? We shall often meet, I hope, in Hertfordshire. I am not likely to leave Kent for some time. Promise me, therefore, to come to Hunsford. Elizabeth could not refuse, though she foresaw little pleasure in the visit. My father and Maria are coming with me in March, added Charlotte, and I hope you will consent to be of the party. Indeed, Eliza, you will be as welcome as either of them. Either. The wedding took place. The bride and bridegroom set off for Kent from the church door, and everybody had as much to say or to hear on the subject as usual. Elizabeth soon heard from her friend, and their correspondence was as regular and frequent as it had ever been. That it should be equally unreserved was impossible. Elizabeth could never address her without feeling that all the comfort of intimacy was over. And though determined not to slacken a correspondence, it was for the sake of what had been rather than what was. Charlotte's first letters were received with a good deal of eagerness. There could not but be curiosity to know how she would speak of her new home, how she would like Lady Catherine, and how happy she would dare pronounce herself to be. Though, when the letters were read, Elizabeth felt that Charlotte expressed herself on every point exactly as she might have foreseen. She wrote cheerfully, seemed surrounded with comforts, and mentioned nothing which she could not praise. Mr. Collins is rubbing off on her. The house, the furniture, the neighbourhood, and the roads were all to her taste, and Lady Catherine's behaviour was most friendly and obliging. It was Mr. Collins's picture of Hunsford and Rosings, rationally softened, and Elizabeth perceived that she must wait for her own visit there to know the rest. Jane had already written a few lines to her sister to announce the safe arrival to London, and when she wrote again, Elizabeth hoped it would be in her power to say something of the Bingleys. Her impatience for the second letter was as well rewarded as impatience generally is. Jane had been a week in town without either seeing or hearing from Caroline. She accounted for it, however, by supposing that her last letter to her friend from Longbourn had, by some accident, been lost. Sure. Caroline must have lost all my letters. Actually, the mailman probably lost all my letters. I'm sure of it. My aunt, she continued, is going tomorrow into the part of the town, and I shall take the opportunity of calling on in Grosvenor Street. She wrote again when the visit was paid, and she had seen Miss Bingley. I did not think Caroline in spirits, were her words, but she was very glad to see me, and reproached me for giving her no notice of my coming to London. I was right, therefore. My last letter had never reached her. Really? I inquired after her brother, of course. He was well, but so much engaged with Mr. Darcy that they scarcely ever saw him. I found that Miss Darcy was expected to dinner. I wish I could see her. My visit was not long, as Caroline and Mrs. Hurst were going out. I dare say I shall see them soon here. Elizabeth shook her head over this letter. It convinced her that accident only could discover to Mr. Bingley her sister's being in town. 4 weeks passed away, and Jane saw nothing of him. She endeavoured to persuade herself that she did not regret it, but she could no longer be blind to Miss Bingley's inattention. After waiting at home every morning for a fortnight, and inventing every evening a fresh excuse for her, the visitor did at last appear. But the shortness of her stay, and yet more the alteration of her manner, would allow Jane to deceive herself no longer. The letter which she wrote on this occasion to his sister will prove what she felt. My dearest Lizzie will, I am sure, be incapable of triumphing in her better judgment at my expense, when I confess to myself that I have been entirely deceived in Miss Bingley's regard for me. Poor Jane! But, my dearest sister, though the event has proved you right, do not think me obstinate if I still assert that, considering what her behaviour was, my confidence was as natural as your suspicion. I do not at all comprehend her reason for wishing to be intimate with me, but if the same circumstances were to happen again, I am sure I should be deceived again. Caroline did not return my visit till yesterday, and not a note, not a line, did I receive in the meantime. When she did come, it was very evident that she had no pleasure in it. She made a slight formal apology for not calling before, as opposed to last time where they're like, it's been years and years and years since I've seen you, and I can't even believe it, and it's just been forever, and I love you so much. It feels so false and disingenuous. I think my vocabulary is getting a little better since reading these. Look at that sun. Oh my gosh. Wow. Absolutely blasting me through this bay window. Oh, I looked too long at the sun just now. What? Yeah, and now she's like making these formal apologies, like, sorry, I haven't seen you soon, bye. Jeez, Caroline. When she did come out, was not calling before, and so not a word wishing to see me, and said not a word of wishing to see me again. Right, last time they're like, may it be only seconds until I see you again. And was in every respect so altered a creature that when she went away I was perfectly resolved to continue the acquaintance no longer. I pity, though I cannot help blaming her. She was very wrong in singling me out as she did. I can safely say that every advance into intimacy began on her side. But I pity her because she must felt that she's been acting wrong. And because I am very sure that her anxiety for her brother is the cause of it. Sure. I need not explain myself farther. 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 Further. And now I'm getting confused. I always thought that would be further. Farther is a distance. Okay. Explain myself farther. And though we know this anxiety to be quite needless, yet if she feels it, it will easily account for her behaviour to me. And so deservedly dear as she is to his sister, whatever anxiety she must feel on his behalf is natural and amiable. I cannot but wonder, however, at her having such fears now, because if he had at all cared about me, we must have met long ago. He knows of my being in town. Oh. And I am certain, for some things she said herself, and yet it would seem, by her manner of talking, as if she wanted to persuade herself that he is really partial to Miss Darcy. Don't like that. I cannot understand it, she says. If I were not afraid of judging harshly, I should be almost tempted to say that there is a strong appearance of duplicity in all of this. But I will endeavour to banish every painful thought, and think only of what will make me happy. Your affection and the invariable kindness of my dear uncle and aunt. Let me hear from you very soon. Miss Bingley said something of his never returning to Netherfield again, of giving up the house, but not with any certainty. We had better not mention it. I am extremely glad that you have such pleasant accounts from your friends at Hunsford. Pray go to see them with Sir William and Maria. I am sure you'll be very comfortable there. Yours, etc. Wow, is that really how they finished letters back then? Yours, etc. I guess, like, ink? Is it an ink thing? Finishing letters with yours, etc. What's the deal with that? I'm gonna have to go Jane Austen because everybody's like, it's totally fine. Jane Austen, here we go. Both of Jane's letters to Lizzie are given to us with a yours, etc., and so are Miss Gardner's. The one letter from Mrs. Gardner simply says, yours very, etc. What's the deal? Okay, my annotated copy of Pride and Prejudice said it's because people would write long send-offs like, I hope you remain in good health, etc. So Jane Austen simplified it after she wrote in the important parts. My favorite was when they went on and on about how they were the recipient's most obedient servant, and the content of the letters is basically, F off, loser. That's funny. This was more the case in Victorian era, which obviously is later than Jane Austen was writing, but people were taught particular forms of how to write letters. Wait, I thought the Regency era and the Victorian era are like right after each other. They're not that far apart. But I'm going to look it up real quick. Young man's best companion, blah, 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 blah. Wow, this is a long post. I've always wondered that too, somebody said. I don't know, the 2-year-old post in front of me, my favorite part of the book, and really want to get a tattoo or some kind of artwork that says yours, etc. Ooh, that would be a cool tattoo. Okay, hold on. The Regency era, I know I've already looked this up, but that person was like, this was in the Victorian era, so not even, that made me like question it. Hold on. Versus the Victorian. Regency or the subperiod, longer Georgian era. Subperiod, meaning that was like just a little baby period, just a 1714 to 1837. And Jane Austen, like, died. Dagon just died in 1817. Okay, so, I mean, this is so interesting, like an era, like, December 1837 to, like, January 1838, they're like, it's a new era. We're going to do things different. We're not going to say yours, etc. How did things change? So, did it change quickly from era to era? I don't know. Did people were like, there's a new queen, it's Victoria, Queen Victoria, and we're going to change it all up. The fashions are changing. Typically, the enactment to later contemporaries uses some historians give an earlier start point, typically the enactment of the Great Reform Act on June 7th. That's my birthday, 1832. Let's just look up real quick. Hold on. The Great Reform Act of 1832 abolished the 40-shilling franchise, which had its origins in the Statute of 1429, limiting who could vote for the Knights of the Shire. It enacted a parliament in the United Kingdom that introduced major changes to the electoral system of England and Wales. Huh. Who knew? Removed seats from the rotten boroughs. Oh, this is so fascinating. I mean, America's such a baby country still, it seems like, as far as countries go. This letter gave Elizabeth some pain, but her spirits returned as she considered that Jane would no longer be duped by the sisters, at least. Don't let yourself be duped, Jane. How is Elizabeth so smart to see all this? Because it's just their character. Jane is just like kind of gullible and naive, kind of. Is it naivete? And Elizabeth is like, everybody sucks. I don't know. All expectation from the brother was now absolutely over. She would not even wish for a renewal of his attentions. His character sunk on every review of it, and as a punishment for him, as well as a possible advantage to Jane, she seriously hoped he might really soon marry Mr. Darcy's sister, as by Wickham's account, she would make him abundantly regret what he had thrown away. Ooh, a revenge wedding. Yeah, you go marry her. See what you're missing out on. I don't know if that's how it works, but Mrs. Gardiner about this time reminded Elizabeth of a promise concerning that gentleman and required information, and Elizabeth had such to send as might rather give contentment to her aunt than to herself. His apparent partiality had subsided, his attentions were over, he was the admirer of someone else. Elizabeth was watchful enough to see it all, but she could see it and write of it without material pain. Right. The observer, a witness, Elizabeth. Her heart had been but slightly touched, and her vanity was satisfied with believing that she would have been his only choice had fortune permitted it. Fortune of, like, money, or fortune of, like, your friends suck? That's an interesting way to put that. The sudden acquisition of £10,000 was the most remarkable charm of the young lady to whom he was now rendering himself agreeable, but Elizabeth, less clearly slighted perhaps in this case than in Charlotte's, did not quarrel with him for his wish of independence. Nothing, on the contrary, could be more natural, and while able to suppose that it cost him a few struggles to relinquish her, she was already allowed to it a wise and desirable measure for both, and could very sincerely wish him happy. Pride and Prejudice. Struggles with marriage. Men and women struggling to get married. All this was acknowledged to Mrs. Gardiner, and after relating the circumstances, she thus went on. I am now convinced, my dear aunt, that I have never been much in love, for I had really experienced that pure and elevating passion, I should at present detest his very name and wish him all manner of evil. But my feelings are not only cordially towards him, they are even impartial towards Miss King. I cannot find out that I hate her at all, or that I am in the least unwilling to think her very good sort of girl. There can be no love in all this. Yeah. When you find out somebody that you've been flirting with and who's been flirting with you, like, suddenly moves on, you're like, I actually, it's so crazy, I never even liked him. Like, this can't possibly be love. I don't know what love is, but I know what love isn't. And it's not this, Mr. Wickham, because you're just like flirty boy. You're just a little flirt boy. That's so funny. Yeah. I actually don't even think I've ever been in love, and I just thought we were having a good time. And I can't even imagine that this other girl that he's talking to now can even be that good of a girl. That's funny. There can be no love in all this, she says. My watchfulness has been effectual, and though I certainly should be a more interesting object to all my acquaintances were I distractedly in love with him. Yeah, everybody would think I'm much more interesting if I were actually in love with somebody, but I cannot say that I regret my comparative insignificance. And now that I'm not in love with anybody, I'm absolutely insignificant. Wow. Okay. Importance may sometimes be purchased too dearly. Right. Yeah, I can't imagine as a young person today going back and like being like, you're not even that important. Whoa. Importance may sometimes be purchased too dearly. I'm going to underline that. And I'm going to underline, I like that for some reason. Kitty and Lydia take his defection much more to heart than I do. They are young in the ways of the world. And so are you, Elizabeth, but I guess not. She reads a lot. That's why we're reading. That's why we're back to reading. They are very young in the ways of the world and not yet open to the mortifying conviction that handsome young men must have something to live on as well as the plain. I like this whole paragraph. I'm just gonna do this whole paragraph. You know, when you get a highlighter and they're like, just highlight the important parts, and you end up highlighting the whole entire page, and you're like, it's all important. This is all going to be on the test. Yeah, it's all important, and it's all going to be on the test. So good luck memorizing all of it. Gosh. I'm going to read this whole last paragraph again. I am now convinced, my dear aunt, that I have never been much in love, for had I really experienced that pure and elevating passion, I should at present detest his very name. I would be much more hurt if I knew that he was talking to somebody else. I would be much more hurt. Oh, that scene in The Hobbit, obviously the Hobbit movies. The Hobbit book is so good. That would be fun to read out loud, and that's a fun book. Didn't need to be 3 movies, sorry. The goblin scene with the Goblin King was disgusting. Love the movies. Love Martin Freeman. Love Gollum, obviously. But the dumb love story between Keely or Keely, and the elf from that girl who played that one chick in Lost. I mean, unnecessary. Love Lee Pace in that movie. Love Lee Pace in that movie. Underrated Lee Pace in that movie. King Thranduil. But she says at the end, she said, "Why does it hurt so bad?" And he said, "Because it was real." This is not real. Wickham is just a fun little flirty boy. I should have detest his very name and wish him all manner of evil. Right. But my feelings are not only cordial towards him, they are impartial towards Miss King. He can have her, and she can have him. I cannot find out that I hate her. I cannot find out that I hate her at all, or that I am in the least unwilling to think her a very good sort of girl, or that I am in the least unwilling to think her a very good sort of girl. I'm not willing to think her a good sort of girl. There can be no love in all this. Oh, like, there can be no love in all this, and there can be no love in all this. All this. None of this is love. My watchfulness has been effectual, and though I certainly should be a more interesting object to all my acquaintances were I distractedly in love with him, I cannot say that I regret my comparative insignificance. Importance may sometimes be purchased too dearly, y'all. Importance may sometimes be purchased too dearly. Period. No semicolon after that. Kitty and Lydia take his defection much more to heart than I do, because they're silly. They are young in the ways of the world, and not yet open to the mortifying conviction that handsome young men must have something to live on as well as the plain. The handsome young men must have something to live on as well as the plain men have something to live on. Wow. I'm going to call it there. That was a short chapter, but fun. And I'm going to call it there, and I'll see you next time. Ba-dum-bum. Don't take my word for it, LeVar. Thanks, LeVar Burton. But don't take my word at it. You go read it for yourself, and you see what you think. Ba-dum-bum. Happy reading.